A very good afternoon to our attendees who are here with us online today. My name is Jazari and I will be your host for the day. A warm welcome to our Go International webinar series, and today's topic is on ICT sector opportunities in the Philippines. By 2021, digital transformation is expected to add USD 8 billion to the Philippines GDP and increase its growth rate by 0.4% annually. Corporations across sectors have embarked on digital transformation journeys with a rise in migration to cloud services and implementation of big data and AI solutions. Meanwhile, the country's internet economy is projected to grow from USD 8 billion to USD 25 billion in 2025, with areas like e-commerce, ride-hailing, and online media witnessing rapid expansion. COVID-19 has also further accelerated the adoption of digital tools and platforms. All these create vast opportunities for our Singapore ICT companies who are looking to venture into the Philippines. For today's program, we are honored to have speakers from Enterprise Singapore and Orisa International, where we will cover an overview of the Philippine market, opportunities in the ICT sector, and various market entry options for Singapore companies. We will also have a fellow ICT company, Edufy, to share his success story of his business journey in the Philippines. Before we start the event proper, allow us to share some functions of this webinar. The webinar slides will be uploaded to SGTech website after the session. We are also making a recording of this webinar, which will be available on our YouTube channel one day after the event. If you have any questions at any point of time, you may use the Q&A function and post in your question. Please help us to indicate your name and company when submitting the question. We will answer to them during the combined Q&A segment after all the presentations have concluded. First up, we have our speakers from Enterprise Singapore, Mr. Darren Lee, Regional Director, Manila, and Ms. Angelica Ortega, Senior Business Development Manager, Manila. Darren was appointed Regional Director of Enterprise Singapore Office in Manila with effect from 1st April 2017. In his current appointment, Darren is responsible for assisting Singapore companies uncover and pursue business opportunities in the Philippines. Prior to this, he was part of the Transport and Logistics Division at then IE Singapore, where he served as an account manager for industry development of the e-commerce and e-fulfillment sector, assisting them in business development and firm-level internationalization strategies. For Angelica, she has over 9 years of experience in helping overseas companies across different sectors expand to the Philippines. She has been with Enterprise Singapore Manila Overseas Center for over 4 years and has been closely working with Singapore enterprises, particularly in the sector of consumer and technology. They will be sharing with us the overview of the Philippine market and tech talent in the Philippines. Now let us welcome Darren and Angelica.
Yeah, hi, very good afternoon. My name is Darren, and yeah, just to check, everybody can see my screen. So with me, I'm two of my colleagues today, Suvan and Angelica, and I'll be running through a couple of items. I'll first give you an overview of the state of relations between Singapore and Philippines. Second, one of the key economic driver, which is Philippines demographics, the impact of COVID-19, and of course, the last point we covered by Angelica, an overview of the tech talent in the Philippines. So zooming in on the Singapore-Philippines relations, I would say that we have a very healthy bilateral relations between the two countries. In 2019, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of bilateral ties. And correspondingly, if we look at bilateral trade figures, these figures have been growing double-digit growth for the last few years. This is, of course, before COVID-19. If you look at 2017 and 2018, the year-on-year change has been double-digit. and primarily is driven by the sharp increase in Philippines exports to Singapore. So this suggests the integration of supply chains between Singapore and the Philippines, particularly the electronics sector. And for 2 consecutive years, bilateral trade reached an all-time high of 21.3 billion.
Sorry, Darren, I think your video is off, so you may want to start your video.
Okay, yeah. Is this on now? Yeah, let me just see.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Can
is this
see your
okay?
I can't see your video when you share. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see the slides, right?
Yeah, I can see the slides. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a Zoom function. Okay. Yeah, so beyond just looking at the high growth in terms of bilateral trade, I think this slide sort of gives you a sense of what are the export industries of the Philippines. As you can see, Philippines exports electronics and electrical equipment. And this is actually a main bulk of Philippines export industry, not just mangoes and fruits that we are more familiar with. So between Singapore and Philippines, Singapore's top 2 product exports to the Philippines are electronics and petroleum oil. We are also the 5th largest export market, with electronics as the top export products. So Singapore's investment in the Philippines have been consistent and in multiple verticals. We are consistently the top ASEAN investor and also the top 5 international investor to the Philippines. And Singapore was the Philippines' 2nd largest investor in 2018. We are also one of the largest tourism market for the Philippines. And you can see the range of companies that have invested in the Philippines. In particular, for the digital content and e-commerce sector, you see that many digital companies see the Philippines as an important market, primarily because of the English-speaking population and the large population size. So some of them have also expanded to set up outsource center to service their needs in Singapore. The other areas that they could be growing could be in terms of content generations. Some of the companies actually have content teams generating content for the Singapore entity. Yeah, so one of the key drivers for the Philippines is really its demographics. So because of the large pool of manpower, talent, and availability of manpower, there are 2 main sectors that have been growing in the Philippines. One of them is the remittance sectors. Currently, there are 2.3 million overseas Filipino workers. And in fact, when you talk about overseas Filipinos, there could be around 10 million of which are abroad. And henceforth, remittance has always been one of the biggest or one of the key economic pillar for the country. For the BPO sector, industry have been growing, and it was the Philippines was the 7th best outsourcing location. And so for remittance, it contributes to about 10% of Philippines GDP. The BPO sector is about another 10%. Yeah. So for the tech sector, you find that it is a ready pool or a good market, primarily for a few reasons. First, the population has been growing at about 2% every year. So with a size of 109 million, you're looking at a growth of 2 million every year. But despite the huge growth or the big growth or the strong growth in the population size, the median age of the population remains young at 26 years old. There are significantly high number of mobile users, primarily because traffic conditions are bad. So when the population commutes, they see as a way to pass time. So they're constantly on their mobile phones. And because of that, perhaps also because of the traffic conditions, Filipinos enjoy to spend time on social media. So their social media usage is also rather high. And they spend an average of 3 hours and 53 minutes on social media channels. So a lot of globally, there are many markets whereby they have large population, but as the economy develops, a lot of time you find that the population starts to slow in terms of growth and start to age. But I think for Philippines, it is a unique factor that even by 2050, if you look at the population pyramid, the base remains wider, and it's a very healthy onion-shaped kind of pyramid. So I think tech by nature will continue to grow in the Philippines simply because the population remains young, right? So that is one factor that I would like to highlight in terms of Philippines' attractiveness. Okay, so the portion that I've presented thus far has been what we have seen before COVID. I just say that with COVID-19, the impact is certainly great. And it has, I think for now, we'd like to just share with you the current cases or the situation in the Philippines. Current cases now in Philippines stands highest in the Southeast Asia region at 164 cases, but of which significant number have already recovered, 49,000 of which are active cases. I think at this point, generally there is a sense that the Philippines can no longer afford to embark on strict lockdowns. So yesterday it was announced that the Philippines will resume and will start to reopen. Hopefully the step up in measures in terms of testing, isolation, and tracing will help to keep cases low or to help it to bring it down or stable. And just like Singapore, the Philippines GDP have been adversely affected. We have seen Q2 drop of negative 16.5%. Q1 was negative 0.2%. And this sort of ended Philippines' continuous, multiple years continuous growth of more than 6%. Starting from 2012, it has always posted a GDP growth of more than 6%. So it's only because of COVID that we have brought it down. We hope Q3 and Q4 will be better for the Philippines. And just like many other countries, the impact on these different varies across sectors. Manufacturing, construction sector, wholesale trade, retail trade, storage business are all adversely affected. As you can see from the green portion of the graph, only ICT and financial and insurance activities actually enjoyed growth as people switch to digital payments, adopt ICT technologies. And unemployment has also been creeping up in the Philippines. In April, it hit 17.7%. So that is about 7.3 million jobless Filipinos. The overseas Filipinos, a lot of them are also returning as they lost their job abroad. Having said so, short-term pains will definitely be painful for the Philippines as we look at, if you look at the economic structure of Philippines, tourism, remittances, BPOs, these are all badly affected because of COVID-19. But if you look at the fundamentals, we expect the country to be able to bounce back fairly quickly once COVID situation is under control. Primarily, again, it goes back to demographics. The huge population provides a quick pool of talents that can be used, and they will, when income recover, they will naturally drive consumption to support the recovery of the economy as well. But here are some of the programs that the Philippines government have introduced to help with economic recovery. Partly, the Bayanihan Act 2 will increase testing. It will provide increased resources to acquire medical supplies. It will support repatriated OFWs. There will be some programs to help in terms of government infrastructure projects. So all in all, we say that in the long term, the outlook should be stable. It's just short-term pains in this 1 or 2 years. Once the situation has stabilized, Philippines should once again return to its position to recover and bounce back. But in the meantime, I think we like to say that it is actually it's a good situation, or rather a conducive environment for the digital sector. The pandemic is accelerating the adoption of digital technologies across multiple stakeholders, from consumers, private sector, and the government. So for the consumers, basically, it forced this change in consumption patterns. So people are switching to home-based activities. Work, entertainment, consumption has all evolved. The private sector, it emphasized the need to adopt digitalization and ICT solutions. It forced them to look beyond just the physical aspect and to expand their online presence. And for government, I think the government has recognized that e-commerce and digitalization is an important sector, and henceforth they will be passing certain laws to support and promote the sector in the Philippines. So likewise, we also see that top conglomerates in the Philippines are focusing their strategies and investment on digitalizations. For Ayala, they are looking at increased investments and to further push out fintechs and adoption of digital payments. And likewise, for the different groups, they have different emphasis in terms of the digital space. Most of them will have a startup unit to focus on identifying worthy investments and to groom these startups to grow in the Philippines. So this highlights the potential growth of the Philippines innovation ecosystem. As you can see, the value here, it is still relatively early stage. So together with the shift towards digital, we expect the innovation ecosystem to grow in the next few years. Okay, now I will invite Angelica to bring us through the tech talent, to give an overview of the tech talent in the Philippines. Yeah, Angelica, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Darren. So we'll just spend a brief portion on the overview of the tech talent here in the Philippines. So as Darren mentioned, a lot of the efforts to capitalize on the Philippines as a potential market is anchored on its demographic characteristics. So you'll see in this chart that the country produces many tertiary graduates. So these are graduates on the college and university level. It is the second biggest among ASEAN countries, following Indonesia. And this is also because, of course, of our population size. And among these graduates and enrollees, a lot of students are actually engaged in tech-related courses such as engineering and technology and information technology. So there's a huge portion of graduate and enrollees that are just focused on tech-related courses and activities. Next slide, please. Okay, so you'll see that a lot of the reason why people outsource or companies outsource to the Philippines is basically because the salaries for in-demand occupations are actually very competitive. In this chart, we selected a few IT or ICT related job descriptions and compared it up against the monthly basic salary in the US. So you'll see that there's a really huge gap in terms of the salaries and wages. But I think based on our research, the Philippines is also pretty much at par, just a bit higher in comparison to its other Southeast Asian neighbors. But I think what's very important to take note of is that the labor market rates in the Philippines are actually very opportunistic. So apart from just the competitive salaries, I think it's important to note that our population size is actually large and growing. This makes our median age in terms of the labor force very young at 23 years old. Among different countries around the world, we also stand at high literacy rates. So 96.6% of the population is literate. And apart from that, English is one of the most proficient languages that we use in market. So it is the primary medium, not only for the academic institutions, but also for government and corporate settings. So this is very important because in terms of contracts, most, if not all, of our contracts in these settings are written in English. So as we've mentioned, the pool is also highly skilled and very productive. So this is why a lot of American and European countries opt to outsource and capitalize on the talent here in the Philippines. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Angelica. So with that, we'd like to share our contact details with everyone. And I think we like to share that we will be very happy to help companies in their business venture to the Philippines, either through business matching or to facilitate certain engagement with the Philippines government, or to introduce you to multipliers and service providers. So once again, we hope that the webinar will help everyone to have a better sense of the Philippines market, and hopefully we'll be able to work with you to assist you in your expansion. Yeah. Okay, so let me stop my screen share.
Yeah, thank you, Darren and Angelica, for the insightful sharing. Next up, we have Mr. Elmer Magno, Country Manager of Orisa International, Philippines, where he will be sharing with us the opportunities in the ICT sector and market entry options into the Philippines. For over 20 years, Orisa International has been working with thousands of companies in developing their market entry strategy, identifying and arranging meetings with potential customers and distributors, and developing lead generation programs for these companies to further grow their business. This wealth of experience has led to Orisa International being appointed as a market entry consultant for 15 export promotion agencies from around the world to refer their companies to Orisa International for trade advisory services. Here in Singapore, Orisa International has been approved by Enterprise Singapore as an in-market and business matching consultant for Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Now let us welcome Elmer to share his presentation. Elmer, over to you. Elmer, you are muted.
Sorry, can you see my screen?
Not yet?
Okay. How about that?
Yeah, okay now. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Jazari. Again, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us again in this webinar. Thank you also for SG Tech for inviting us, for inviting Orisa International together with Enterprise Singapore Manila and Edified in speaking about the Philippine ICT industry in the Philippines. So I will be speaking about, I will be sharing with you the overview of ICT industry in the Philippines and some of the opportunities. Okay. Yes. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. So just to introduce ourselves, we are a market entry consulting firm headquartered in Singapore, and we have offices in Southeast Asia. Basically, our services revolve around helping company to understand the local market, entering the market, and growing their business in the market. So one unique aspect of our company is the experience. We have been helping companies for more than 20 years now, and we have done thousands of projects in almost every sector. So here are our core services. We help companies find distributors. We also do market research to help companies who want to gather some market information for their market entry strategy. And we also help in lead generation services. So here are our offices in Southeast Asia. Basically, we are a team of around 30 people, and we are divided into two teams. One team is doing the market research, while the other teams, the trade teams, do the distributor search and business matching projects. So these are samples of our government clients. Many of our government export agencies are from North America, Europe, and in Asia. So many of these government agencies refer companies to us for market research and distributor search. So here are our list of corporate clients. We have helped companies selling everything from apples to aerospace, dental equipment to defense equipment, education to environment, medical to marine, and some more. Well, here is an example list of our clients in the ICT sector. These include companies selling online programs, cybersecurity products, digital banking, consulting services, and analytics. All right, so that's about Orisa International. Now let me go over to my presentation by giving you the overview of the ICT industry in the
Alma,
Philippines.
sorry, I think your video is also off. Can you, don't mind, just switch on your video? Thank you.
I think it's because of the settings.
Earlier on, we can see you though. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, if you can excuse, maybe I can try again
Okay, no
later.
worries. Yeah, you continue with
Yeah.
your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see, in 2019, the ICT sector recorded a total of $6 billion investment. So majority of this investment came from D2 Telecommunity. It's the third telco operator approved by the government. So for the longest time, our country with over 100 million people and thousands of islands only had two telco players. Those are the PLDT and Globe. So now Dito Telecommunity is currently working on its network infrastructure for its commercial rollout next year by March 2021. So hopefully it will improve drastically the internet infrastructure or telco infrastructure of the country. So ICT developments in the Philippines is chiefly driven by the business process outsourcing industry, or locally we called it IT business process management, or IT BPM. So we are one of the leading providers of these outsourcing services next to India. And many of the companies who outsource our business to us are from the US. In terms of internet usage, as Darren mentioned earlier, we are one of the top most internet users in the world. And some of the online activities Filipinos loves to do are social media, video, live streaming, music streaming, online gaming, and shopping. So as you can see, the table on top, it presents the actual estimated and projected IT market value before COVID-19. So the figures may change a bit. However, we believe the trajectory is quite the same. So for the purpose of reference, we still included this table. So the growth of IT market value will largely be driven by the services and software sales. So the demand from IT services and software sales mainly come from the outsourcing industry and large enterprises in the Philippines, particularly those in the industries of telecom, financial services, retail, manufacturing, and government. Especially that our government has launched an IT infrastructure program back in 2017. I will discuss more on this in the next slide. But interestingly, Philippines is one of the countries with lowest digital competitiveness ranking in the world. So even in comparison with our neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, we still lag behind, which means that the country has we had a lot of room for improvement. And this presents an opportunity for IT manufacturers and service providers. Now, I will go on in getting the overview by key sectors of the ICT industry in the Philippines. First, I will go to public sector. As I have mentioned, the government launched an IT infrastructure program back in 2017. It is called the E-Government Master Plan 2022, or EGMP 2022. The intention of this is to digitally transform the basic services of the government. And the lead agency of this program is the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT, which manages, monitors, and generally almost do all the procurements. So it has three main programs, as you can see on the right portion of my screen: National Broadband Plan, National Government Data Center, and National Cybersecurity Plan. So while this is a public initiative, some of the components of this infrastructure program have actually received supports from the private sector. For example, the ICT partnered with Facebook in 2019 to build a high-speed undersea fiber cable. The length of it is 12,900 kilometers. The ICT also signed an agreement with Hayal Root. It's a Singapore company to invest up to $2 billion for the rollout of fiber optics cables nationwide. In addition, if you have heard about the massive build infrastructure program of the government, those will also open some opportunities for IT sector because some of those infrastructure projects have IT components too, especially during the planning stage, and much of it are in the transportation sector. So, okay. So the next industry is the IT business process management. So this industry is considered as the most dynamic in the Philippines and is the leading contributor to the economy, accounting for 60% of the overall economic growth in the past 2 years. So the common type of outsourcing services in the country are knowledge process outsourcing, back office support, animation, call centers, software development, game development, engineering design, and even medical transcription. So this industry are huge consumers of IT products and solutions, like from computers to laptops to high-speed internet connection, tools like workforce management, communication tools like messaging and video conferencing, performance tracking, storage and databases. For some services like call centers, they use specialized tools like headsets and recording systems. For knowledge processes, they generally use analytics and business intelligence software. But one thing to note about this industry is now the need to upskill workers into a middle and higher value skills because of the automation. So those roles and skills are data analytics, application development, automation, system integration, and some industry-specific services for the ICT, healthcare, financials, logistics, animation, and gaming sectors. So this will drive the need for technical, analytical, and industry-specific training and development services, as well as the need to purchase of necessary technologies or hardwares. Okay. Next sector is the software and IT services. This sector is actually closely associated with the IT BPM, primarily because outsourcing is a key consumer of software and services. For example, cloud computing is very important in the outsourcing industry because of its we call this requirements for network solutions and the need for continuous service improvements. Also, enterprise applications such as packaged software, data warehousing, and the one that I mentioned before in the previous slide, business intelligence, is also in demand in this industry. In addition, one of the primary subsector of the outsourcing industry is software development and publishing. We have more than 400 companies operating in the country, including NetSuite, Accenture, Capgemini, Genpact, and HP. But outside apart from outsourcing industry, large enterprises are also key consumers of this industry, particularly the telco, the financial services sector, logistics sector, retail, and the manufacturing sector, and also now the public sector because of the launching of the IT infrastructure program and the build program. Also, it's also interesting to note, due to COVID-19, e-learning before was at a very young stage in the Philippines. And this pandemic has accelerated the adoption of the digital education. And now e-learning is anticipated to become a major component of the Philippine education system. One key challenge of the market of the local market in particular, is price sensitivity. And also the complexity of solutions is generally lesser than those of the developed markets. And most SMEs have a low level of digitization. Next sector is the retail and e-commerce. E-commerce in the Philippines is growing fast and is projected to become the biggest component of the internet economy of the Philippines. Notably, most utilized tool in online selling in the Philippines are social media and online marketplaces like Lazada and Shopee. So I would like to stress, like, I think Darren already mentioned this, that social media is very big in the Philippines, particularly the Facebook. So this is an important selling tool for the businesses. So marketing and promotions using social media is a key channel that most businesses here are capitalizing or consider. Moreover, the COVID-19 also accelerated the e-commerce transaction in adoption in the country. For example, we saw how the pandemic in the Philippines increased the usage of various e-payment channels and online banking and e-money platforms like GCash and Paymaya. Also, malls, supermarkets, restaurants, and other companies have put up their own e-commerce immediately. Ride-hailing services providers such as Grab, Angkas, and Joyride have also introduced delivery services to meet the increasing demand of online delivery. So some challenges of the retail and e-commerce are the low credit card penetration, because Filipinos would still prefer cash on delivery whenever possible. Also, supply chain efficiency and slow internet speed are also some hindrances of this industry. Next sector is the financial services. So the transaction value of the fintech market in the country recorded a 5.7 billion in 2018, and the figure is expected to grow up to 10.5 billion by 2022. In addition, the number of startups entering in the fintech sector of the Philippines is at the rate of 16% annually. At present, we have over 136 fintech companies, including Paymaya, Ayana, GrabPay, Coins.ph, DragonPay, GCash, PesoPay, which are all funded by big venture capitalists such as Alibaba, Globe, Tencent, Grab, Oriente, PLDT, and Gojek. As I have said, in the e-commerce, COVID-19 also increased the usage of digital payments. Like in 2016, as you can see in the chart, right, there are about 11.4 million e-money accounts. But GCash, one of the e-money platforms in the country, said that they now have 20 million registered e-money users. And a sharp increase happened since mid-March. So that's when the lockdown started in the Philippines. So also, banks in the Philippines, they are reporting that their online bank transactions since the lockdown has jumped significantly high compared before. So, despite this development, the country's financial services is still in early stage. Some of the challenges it faces are the access to venture capitalists, weak internet infrastructure, low trust in using credit cards. As I mentioned, Filipinos prefer cash on delivery whenever possible, and lack of talent, which resulted in difficulty in hiring and retaining fintech talents. Next sector in the ICT industry is the cybersecurity. So the Philippines is one of the countries in the world that faces the highest number of detected online threats. Actually, our government is receiving an average of 84 incidents per month last year, with the top cyber threats are cyber hacking, email or web phishing, web defacement, online fraud and scam, and social media hacking. So with the continuing risk of the country, as discussed earlier in the slides, the government also launched the National Cybersecurity Plan in 2022 to address this urgency to protect the nation from cyber threats. It is also worth to note that the nation pales in terms of number of certified professionals compared to other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. For example, for those holding the world's premier cybersecurity certification called certified information system security professional. The Philippines currently only has 146 certified professionals compared to Singapore, which has 2,000. Although Singapore's population is 18 times lesser than what we have. So this presents an opportunity for training providers, as this is one of the objectives included in the cybersecurity plan of our government. Meanwhile, the good news is that companies in the Philippines are starting to prioritize investing in their cybersecurity capabilities. Recently, a new research examining business attitude about cybersecurity was released by Palo Alto Networks, and it revealed that one of two companies in the Philippines have increased their cybersecurity budget compared to 2019. And the popular solutions taken by companies in the Philippines are anti-malware and antivirus tools, as well as next-generation firewalls. Also, many companies in the Philippines has begun investing in cloud-native security and software-defined wide area network security, because Philippine companies are starting to connect their offices and staff to cloud infrastructure. So those are the key sectors, key subsectors of the ICT industry in the Philippines. Now, the table here, it shows the trends in the country's ICT industry as predicted by IDC Philippines. So in a nutshell, if we summarize this table, the Philippine ICT industry is going to continue the enterprise-wide digital innovation, not just from the private sector, but also from the government. Organizations will also prioritize cybersecurity. Development of big data analytics will continue to increase as it drives data monetization, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And lastly, there is a need to upscale the workforce and the workplace to adapt in the digital transformation. So, in summary, the Philippine government policies, that highly supports the development of ICT industry, will greatly help open up the opportunities of our ICT sector. This government initiative also, along with the continuous digital innovation of large enterprises, will demand higher levels of IT integration into their operations, particularly like the adoption of cloud computing solutions, which offer technologies with lower capital and management costs. So while SMEs may have low level of digitization, we believe that there is a potential for sustained growth as cost structure and maintenance or all these management demands of cloud application infrastructure can be customized, compatible with the SME's budget. Also, the impact of COVID-19 will continue to accelerate the e-commerce and e-payment adoption in the country, which also drive the IT investments, not only in retail and financial services, but also in logistics and retail infrastructure, as well in education and healthcare. And as BPO, or as the business process outsourcing expands its value or services, it will create an IT investment opportunities, such as technical and analytical trainings, software development, storage solutions, and hardware requirements. However, there are still a lot of challenges as the Philippines develops its ICT sector, which include the shortage of mid to high-end IT professionals, lack of cloud supporting infrastructure, cybersecurity issues, and software piracy in the country. It remains high. So yeah, and lastly, the outsourcing sector, which is the key contributor of our economy, is facing stronger competition with other outsourcing destinations, particularly with India and Malaysia in Asia. So, but the Philippines remain competitive because of our cultural and Western accent similarities, particularly with the US. As you notice, most of the companies here are US companies that outsource their businesses here. Also, our cost competitiveness and good knowledge in terms of IT background. So for the next two slides, I'm going to share with you a couple of case studies from some of the ICT clients that explored the Philippine market. So one is from provider of digital wealth and risk management software solutions. The client business need is they are developing a wealth management platform and they want to check if if it has potential in the Philippines. So the solution we provided for them is the market research to help them understand the market visibility of their new product. So, excuse me. So our key findings was, well, there were financial institutions who are willing to explore their product. The market was not yet ready for such a platform. So our research also identified the key challenges for that deter the use of the client's platform in the Philippines. So as you can see, market research is really important before you enter a market because it will help you validate and identify important factors such as viability of your product or readiness of the market for your products and services. It also helps you to understand the characteristic of the local market. So my next case study is about a company that provides data analytics, data mining, big data, and data management consulting services. So the client is looking for a local partners or agents in the Philippines. He also wanted to speak with the prospective end users to understand the maturity. So the solution we provided for him was business matching. And the results was the client identified 4 strong potential partners. And he remained in contact with these companies. And in the span of 12 months, he went to the country thrice. So this case study of business matching shows the value of constant communication and follow-ups. As I mentioned, in the span of 12 months time, the company visited the market thrice and remained in contact with all the prospective partners and end users he met during his first visit. So this enabled him to not only find potential partners and understand the level of maturity of the market, but to also understand the local business culture and build the business relationship. Okay, so my next few slides is about one of the market entry program that we developed. But for the interest of time, I will not discuss each slide. I will just briefly explain the program and how it works while navigating through the slides. All right. So the next few slides are more on text. The content are like straightforward. Since we will be sharing with you the slides, you can read it at a time convenient for you. Okay. So from our own experience and experiences of helping foreign companies enter the Southeast Asia market, we have developed a unique market entry program. We called it the Market Immersion Program. So this is it. The Market Immersion Program, or MIP, it allows a company to establish an immediate presence in its target market without the upfront cost of setting up your own operations. It does this by providing the client with its own local staff who will focus on sales and business development or technical sales support. While Orisa International, our company, will help you do the recruitment, management, and payroll functions. So some of the key benefits of the Market Immersion Program are it lowered the cost, it minimized the cost and risk of entering the market. It helps you fast track the market entry. We already, since it will, the dedicated person will be under our payroll and our management. So there is already an established administrative structure. So this program offers also an easy exit process for the companies. And this program actually addresses key issues of high cost employment issues and difficulties in hiring locally without a registered presence. So how does the market immersion program work? So basically, if you look at the chart, you can look at it as a quarter of the year. So the first quarter, third quarter. So basically, in the first quarter, Urisi International will help you develop customized market entry strategy. We also prepared the creation of a customer and partner database. We also do consultations with the client to finalize the strategy. So by the second quarter, we are expecting that the local employee will be on board, and then the product training will be done by the client, and the commencement of business development activities with the support of Orisa International will begin. And then on the third quarter, there will be assessments of market entry progress, and a revision or modification of strategy if required through discussions with the client and the dedicated person. And lastly, during the fourth quarter, we will review the program on the performance and of the performance of throughout the program and future strategy and actions. So this is about to my last slides. So what you should know about, these are the things that you should know about doing business in the Philippines. But first and foremost, we advise you to study the market before you enter and study it thoroughly. Why? Because one, your study will help determine if the market is basically the right market for your products and services. You will be able to answer questions such as, are policies, infrastructure, supply chain, and human resources in place? Are cost and risk manageable? How is the local market development? And how easy can you obtain these pieces of information? Also, a study will help you determine your best route to market. Is incorporation your best option? What about setting up a joint venture? Or if you want to start small and test the market, how is the market for co-location or outsourcing services? Or are you looking for ease in distribution? A study will also help you in coming up with informed decisions when it comes to putting up your business strategy. The second that we would like to emphasize is the business culture here. There are several nuances, but in general, the most important are Filipinos are hospitable, local connections are important in making an introductions, or if you want to get things done relatively fast. The business culture is there is a slow approach to building business relationships. Email replies can also be slow. Also, Filipinos, we prefer face-to-face interactions and even texting and messaging. And lastly, there is a norm of communicating indirectly, which takes into consideration non-verbal gestures or actions. Okay, so this is my last slides. So this is how can we assist you? We do market research. We can help you find distributors. We can also help you develop lead generation programs, and for companies who wants to grow their sales and build their own relationships with customers. So thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. I will pass this back to Jezeri.
Thank you, Amar, for your sharing. Okay, next up, right, we have Mr. Ryan So, founder and CEO of Edify, a Singapore startup which provides blockchain-based credential storage and verification system. Ryan is a business strategist during his entrepreneurial journey. Being an experienced entrepreneur for more than 18 years, he spent most of his journey focusing on education-related ventures. He embarked his blockchain journey in late 2017 before starting Edify in the early 2018. And just within a span of short 10 months, he has brought Edify from an idea to mainnet launch with a ready pool of 40,000 committed users upon official launch in 2 countries. He will be sharing with us his own successful business journey in the Philippines. Ryan, over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, hi everyone. Just let me share my slide. Okay, are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, sure. All right. My name is Ryan. I'm the Chief Executive and Founder for Edify. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story about my venture into Philippines. As what was shared earlier on, we started off Edify in the year 2018 in March. And we took about 12 months to actually develop the product. And of course, we position ourselves as a blockchain-based credential storage verification system. So I started Philippines, penetration in Philippines about last February itself. And obviously a lot of reasons of why we selected Philippines was actually very much already being shared by the speakers earlier, but fundamentally just four simple reasons. English speaking, all right, and second largest ASEAN market. Fake credentials, I mean, this in view of what exactly my product is all about. So fake credential, fake documentation was actually a major thing. And in fact, there was a known street that's actually, you can walk in there, pay like $14 USD and walk out 30 minutes with a piece of documents to actually show that you're a graduate of that university. And of course, the last but not least, the developing country going through digital transformation. So over my journey itself, what I've been going in is that basically I gone in basically on a lot of events, all right? And last year, of course, pre-COVID itself, I gone through almost on every month or every 2-3 months, I actually go through events. And that's also where, of course, being a startup with no proven track records, basically, I actually went in and tried to validate my product with facing with the potential prospective clients per se. And that's ultimately how it gains good traction. And I managed to do a soft launch, all right, with like 6 months down on venturing into Philippines. So did a soft launch October. And currently now we are pursuing projects with TESDA, which is a skill future equivalent in Philippines, and also AMA education system, which is comprised one of the largest education network over there. So pre-COVID did a project launch with TESDA with their national certificates, which is given to domestic worker. And the most recent news perspective-wise, of course, is the official rollout with one of the FINMA education network. And of course, this was actually one of the press release over there. So the journey have always been going in, and then last year itself was like every month I go in 1 week a month. Pre-COVID, I was going in alternate week. So those are the things that to make sure that we get the client feedback. And of course, like what previous speaker was mentioning, a lot of context was really much face-to-face, and of course, texting and so on and so forth. So those were the experience that I really got my hands dirty per se. And eventually now what we do is that we also set up, I have a team there in Philippines, and now in the process of setting up a local office and so on and so forth. So all this happening within a short time frame of like 18 months per se. And definitely Philippines is one of the fastest growing market in Southeast Asia. All right, I think that's about it my sharing. Of course, I will welcome different Q&A later on as we move forward. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for your personal sharing. We'll now like to open for the Q&A segment, and I would like to invite all the speakers back again. So may I invite the speakers to on your video? So for the audience, if you have any questions, right, you can use the Zoom Q&A function to submit in your question. All right. So I see there are a few questions coming in already. So, okay, there's this question from Linda. So Linda is asking, right, whether there are any other, any cities within Philippines conduct technology trials, and also whether is it advisable to, shift the back-end tech development things to Philippines, which city are better. So perhaps, Darren and Angelica will be able to answer this.
Yeah, I think naturally the top few cities in a different region will make a lot of sense. So Manila, Cebu, and Davao. This could be the first locations to explore. But having said so, I think we do see companies, or rather actually BPO companies, setting up in different cities, and it's really a matter of them getting the sense of the local manpower base, the talent base, and understanding what they're comfortable with. As for moving on to back-end role, I think we have seen companies who have done that. And in fact, they have operations in Davao and Manila. So it really depends on the company and the sense of the market. Yeah.
Okay, how about the one that talking about that asked about is it advisable to shift their back-end tech development teams to Philippines? You know, like which cities are better? Because early on, I think ESG also shared about the tech talent in Philippines. So Angelica, perhaps you would like to take this question. You are muted, Angelica.
I think if in terms of shifting the back-end tech talent to the Philippines, it's really dependent on what type of activities you plan to shift and if you're actually comfortable about doing it. But I think generally the statistics in terms of tech talent, English speaking, the time zone between the Philippines and Singapore is the same. It's actually very favorable. So I think depending on the talent or back-end requirements that you wish to outsource or offshore to the Philippines, it really depends on this. But if it's a general sensing, then it makes a lot of sense to offshore and outsource to the Philippines based on the demographic and cost nature of the business. Yep.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think early on, Darren also answered some question by typing in. So maybe I would just like to reiterate the question again so that the rest of the audience can also get to hear. So I think based on maybe like ESG experience, what are some of the common challenges that we see Singapore companies may face, right, when entering the Philippines market? I think maybe Darren, you would like to reiterate that again. And of course, if let's say Elmer, you have any comments, because since you work with many companies also expanding into Philippines, you can also share with us like what are the common challenges that you see the companies face.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I think a lot of times we see that language is not really an issue in the Philippines. So it's very easy to talk to people, to have a sense. But after the preliminary meeting or the first meeting, follow-ups can be challenging. I think on this note, actually what we realize is that a lot of the Filipino companies really want to have a sense of how serious the company is in the market. So they know this by looking at how often you visit them in the Philippines. Do you come in once a month? I mean, these are all pre-COVID situation, but theoretically, once a month, do they see you? So it could be a matter of actually just touching base every time you're in the Philippines to just let them know that I'm serious, I'm committed to the market, and coming in and say, hey, maybe we can explore, we can do something. And gradually, as they see that you are committed, you build a team, especially when you have a local team, I think they'll be more comfortable with you because they know that you are committed to the market. Yeah. So that is one. The second challenge could be in terms of the legal and tax, navigating the local laws, especially tax matters. I think in Singapore, we have the luxury that our regulation framework is really very clear-cut. We have all the digital solutions to help companies address whatever they need to do, whether is it in terms of hiring manpower or whether is it grants or whatsoever. I think in the Philippines, we have seen companies who, when they were just exporting their services and exporting their products, they actually do very well. But after they set up the company to expand, to focus on the developments in Philippines, they hit bottlenecks because they spend a lot more time on administrative issues rather than business development. Yeah. So these are two challenges that I see that companies face.
Yeah. How about Amber? Amber, you are muted.
Yes. Excuse me. Yeah, as for the challenges by the
Yes.
companies, yeah, I agree with Darren. One thing the company that are be that hello.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I thought I was breaking up. So it's really the business building of business relationships in the Philippines is very slow. So it takes time to develop. So that is an important thing. Like for example, we have seen many companies who decide once they found the partner, they have been quick to decide to terminate the agreement when the sales for their product are not picking up. but they have to realize that the business relationships in the Philippines takes time. So also some of the foreign companies that some of the challenges also is the geographic location of key distributors or key distributors in the Philippines, because most of the distributors in the Philippines are located in Metro Manila. But the Philippines is composed of three principal islands like Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And we have growing cities in these parts like Cebu City and Davao City. So it is advisable for companies, if they are going to the route of having a distributor or a partner like system integrator, to select a partner that has a network or coverage in the areas of Visayas and Mindanao.
Okay, thank you, Alma. So we have a question for Ryan. So Ryan, based on your, your journey right in Philippines, so do you hire any tech talent in Philippines before you actually even started a legal entity in Philippines? If so, how did you do?
Okay. I think even before I started business development, I already have a tech team in Philippines. So basically, because I mean, in terms of preparation aspects of things, like what Darren actually said, all right, they wanted actually to know that whether you are sincere in developing the market. So prior to even just starting the business development, I already have a remote team basically, all right, in Philippines. Basing from back end, front end, QA, so the full-fledged tech team itself. So as we start to move forward in terms of business development, then obviously, like what again Darren mentioned, the sincerity, going there, flying in every month, and things like that. They actually just want to see that you are sincere in developing and selling a product. Because I mean, in any IT services itself, service support is also important. So it's not just selling a sale, but of course, it's also supporting them. Then I start to move even doing remote hiring aspects, which means getting a local company to actually hire a candidate for me, all right, before moving into now setting up a local entity itself. So it was a very few stage process that I moved forward in terms of moving into Philippines.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So we have another question from YouTube. So yes, a few questions, right? I think early on, Angelica, you also answered to some of the questions that's about the corporate tax. So basically, YouTube asked, what is the Philippines corporate tax rate? Are there any controls on reputation of profits? What are the rules regarding transfer pricing, and how difficult it is to set up a fully foreign-owned entity in Philippines? Perhaps, ESG and Orisa, both of you can take this question as well. Darren or Angelica?
Okay, I can cover 1 and 4. I'm just not typically familiar with 2 and 3, to be straightforward. So the typical corporate income tax rate in the Philippines is at 30%. I guess it's also useful for everyone to know that the government is looking for or formulating certain legislative measures to lower this down. But as of speaking, it's still at 30%. In terms of how difficult it is to set up a fully foreign-owned entity in the Philippines, I think it's highly dependent on the nature of the business. So the current measures in the Philippines are actually very domestic in nature, whereby most industries will require local ownership to it. So it really depends on the nature of the business and the operations. In terms of setting up, it is very different than the process which you have in Singapore, where typically you can set up an entity in a day. In the Philippines, it will probably take you 3 to 6 months, depending on how complete your documentation is, because there are multiple agencies involved on a national and local government unit level. Yep, so I think I'll defer to my other co-panelists for 2 and 3.
Yeah. Darren or Alma?
2 and 3 are the questions about
So question 2 is about,
profits.
Alright, and question 3 is about rules regarding transfer pricing. Do you have any advice on this?
Yeah, I think generally Philippine corporate tax rate is at 30%. There is a withholding tax component. So most of the transactions, the Filipino will be more familiar with withholding 30% of tax on any item that they pay out to a foreign company. Having said so, there is a Philippine-Singapore tax treaty that should lower it to 15%. But the application has been not that straightforward. I think there have always been cases whereby the Filipino partners have always expressed that they are more comfortable with charging 30%. So that is always a challenge that we have when it comes to tax matters. Yeah, correct. So that is for point 2. On transfer pricing, I'm not too familiar myself. So I guess I would be happy to check in your contacts, and if there's a reply.
We can refer them later on to ESG. Right. If you got a reply, maybe you can share it with us. We can also contact the audience accordingly. Yeah, I think there's another questions that come in. I think a lot of companies here really wanted to know about, all the legal taxation kind of issues here. So there's another question from Sriniva about sales tax structure. If we transact from Singapore, will it be double tax and can touch GST rates local on Philippines? Any advice on this?
Yeah, so we have seen, I think for the tech sector, we have seen the most biggest range of options in terms of incorporation, ranging from companies that actually entirely just bill everything and invoice everything out of Singapore. So because of that, your tax liability is actually just to Singapore. And yeah, and that's how it works, So that is one possibility, of course. But of course, the limitation is then that when it comes to hiring local team, there could be certain challenges. So we also seen some companies whereby they invoice out of Singapore, but they work through co-working space as using it as a business address to hire, right? So you have a balance. And of course, the full incorporation approach whereby you set up a whole marketing office, run your own office, you pay local taxes. So there are certain benefits. Like for example, if you are going after government projects, there will be certain clauses that they will need you to have a Filipino entity before you can participate. But if you're just purely through a private project, then it is actually I would say you have quite a lot of different avenues that you can do so. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe Elmer would like to add on. Yeah.
Elmer, would you like to add on?
Sorry, which question again? Sorry.
So earlier we are saying about the rules regarding transfer pricing.
Mm-hmm. So for the transfer pricing, unfortunately, I don't have any idea about that. But maybe if we can get back to that question later.
Yeah, then the other question is about the sales tax structure. If we transact from Singapore, will it be double tax and can touch GST rates locally on Philippines?
Same with that, because the tax structure in the Philippines is a little bit complex. So maybe if I can get back to that later, I will check with our accountant, because I think we also in a transfer pricing model, so I can check with them.
Okay. So we have a question from Wen Long, right? Because are there any financial institutions, in Philippines that are open to new technology to evaluate corporate borrowers? So earlier on, I think Elmer, you touched on some of the opportunities in the financial services sector. You all came across any of the financial institutions in Philippines that are open to this kind of new technology to evaluate, corporate borrowers? So far, have you all seen any of these?
Yeah, I would say, based on our experience with a couple of companies that have a product about wealth management and asset management solutions, there are financial companies in the Philippines that are open to explore new technologies, particularly coming from the western part of the world. They are very keen. However, the next question is if that product will be able to be adapted or accepted by the target end users. But
Okay.
generally, I would say financial companies in the Philippines are generally open in exploring new technologies.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I'd like to add on. I think one of the challenge has been that the banks are generally interested, but when what we found is that they are so very concerned in terms of security, right? So when a startup or a tech solution provider approach the banks directly on their own, unless you are driving it from top down, meaning that the CEO or the CEO or CTO is very keen, it is very difficult to gain significant traction. You're probably better off working through system integrators who are already working with the banks and have established relations with the banks to get you through the door, right? So that is the part that I think for Singapore companies to rethink their market approach. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So we have a question from Thailand, right? With COVID-19 situation, what is your advice for business development activities that can be effective, like whether it's SGTech or even at ESG, right? Able to organize focus group discussion with a handful of enterprises. In fact, for SGTech itself, right? I mean, because of COVID-19, a lot of activities are, the physical activities are currently not being able to help. So we are also looking at various avenues to see how we can help our Singapore companies to conduct such activities online. So in fact, HTech is working with various ESG regional officers as well. I mean, for the Philippine side, we are actually also looking at organizing some of online business matching in the coming months. That one is with Davao City. So we will be able to share more information once we have more details. Yeah, so definitely there are plans, while we are also trying to see how we can transit from the physical activities, to the online activities, other than such webinars that we provide insights to the members, right? We wanted to also see how, we can help companies to do some business matching online activity. So once we have more of the program firm out, not only in the Philippines, but definitely also in the ASEAN, the other ASEAN regions, definitely we will share it with the audience. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have most of the questions covered. So before we end off, I just wanted to open up to the panelists, right? To perhaps, any like top advice or closing remarks that you would like to share with the fellow Singapore companies here, what is the top advice to them when venturing into Philippines?
Okay, I think maybe I'll go first. I think what we've seen is that the initial part will take time, but once you're past the initial barrier to entries, the barrier will actually kind of work in your favor once you get through. Others who are actually trying to come in will go through the same challenge and will become be quite difficult, right? So I think the stickiness is there. It's just that the initial phase is challenging and you need a lot of commitment. Even if you have to hire a local team, the CEO or the owner or the top management has to give attention to the local team, meaning they need to be there to drive the initiative, to guide. You can't just leave the team to run on your own and then every quarter come in and ask, hey, how's your results? If that's the case, that's the approach. It's really not going to work. But I think on this note, I think the second point to share is also that Singapore really has good reputation and familiarity. And I think Filipinos in general trust the Singapore brand. So that kind of helps us when we enter and approach the market as well. So we do hope that all businesses will make full use of it, but at the same time also protect the reputation of Singapore. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Alma? Yeah.
Yep. So from our end, again, I would say if you have the opportunity, consider first to to study the market, especially if your product is very new and very advanced. So you may have to do a market check first to see if it's very viable and if the market is already ready. Also, the business culture. The business culture is of the Philippines is a bit how do you say this? Like it's a bit tricky. Like there are several nuances, but um, especially we are indirect. You know, there is a norm of communicating indirectly. So that's very important to consider. And also, Filipino companies, most Filipinos avoid confrontation. So sometimes Filipinos would never say no in front of you, or sometimes when Filipinos say yes, it may not be a yes. It could be a maybe. So it's very important to have a consistent and constant communication with the company you are dealing with. So and also so it's very important to have the patience. So as Darren mentioned, once you pass for the on that first barrier, you should be good. And also the Philippine market is very price sensitive. So some of the companies, it's very normal here that many companies would immediately ask for payment terms. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And over to you, Ryan. I think, Ryan, you also
Okay.
have some questions coming in. Yeah, because based on your success story
Okay,
in
let me just
Philippines,
try,
right?
yeah, let me try
Yeah,
to sum it
correct.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Uh,
So,
I think one of the most challenging aspects of things, I mean, this was pre-COVID, all right? You have to be prepared to be stuck in the traffic for 3 hours. But of course, that's over now, all right?
yeah,
So I think in terms of the challenging aspects is really about commitment, all right? The Philippines companies basically need to see, as long as you validate your product and services, the next thing you really need to see is that they want to see commitment from there. And as long as you are able to do that commitment, obviously having a local front, working through channel partner or SI are probably some of the potential methods. You have to have multiple channels. That was how I actually edified. There are some clients that we go approach ourselves. There's certain sector that we work through SI. So it's really about finding out what is actually fitting for your own product or services. It can't be, one key thing is that whatever works in Singapore might not work in Philippines. That's very important. So you are really going in to really explore and find out what works for your product and services. And of course, culture is just something you need to adapt in terms of that. And having said that, I mean, eventually, Philippines is a large market. If you're talking about population aspects, it's like almost 20 times, compared to Singapore. So from a revenue standpoint, effort aspects, that could be something that you need to make on comparison, the kind of effort and return, the ROI. So that's also why over the past 1 year, I was willing to spend 1 week a month over there. And eventually, like also what Darren has said, the initial path was difficult, but once you really get through that path and you have paying clients, and those are the clients that will eventually shout for you, and the network effect from, oh, no, I got this service from this Singapore company and it was good. So that kind of word of mouth actually worked quite well. But as mentioned, it was really the initial path of really putting the head down and working and really be resourceful. And eventually, in terms of revenue aspects, as mentioned, Philippines is much larger. So it might worth the effort for you to really put in some thoughts into the Philippine market.
okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Angelica, you have anything to share?
I think everyone covered the key points. Just to highlight, I think for the Philippine market, the importance of practicing patience, especially in the initial stages. And with this, it's also important to tap really partners that, and even service providers that can be trusted. I mean, a lot of times that there are many in the market, but it's important that the service providers or the partners that you tap into are actually credible and have been vouched for. And second, I think one is the importance of contextual reality in the setting. Like, I think a lot of the information that most foreign businessmen get are actually from the news channels and all of this. But once you come to the Philippines, the situation may be very different from what is being reported on an international scene. So just to be cautious of contextual reality, and of course exercising contextual intelligence when you go into the market. And of course, like the whole presentation covered, that the current demographics together with the COVID-19 situation really accelerated the adoption of digital technology. So it's something that can be used to explore different opportunities in market.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we are running out of time soon. So once again, right, I would like to thank our speakers from Enterprise Singapore, Orisa International, and Edify for the wonderful sharing and advices to our companies, and of course, all the questions from our attendees. So we hope all of you have gained valuable takeaways from this session. So before we end, right, we'd just like to share some of our upcoming Go International webinars. So we have one on Vietnam that is coming out later part of this week. And we have the 5th edition of our Entering China series happening next week. So you can actually scan the QR code or visit HTAG website to register for these upcoming events. And also, as shared earlier, right, so SGT and ESG, we are also planning for an online business matching activity with some Philippines companies from Davao City. So this activity is currently planned sometime in late September or October period. So you may actually indicate your interest on the post-webinar survey form. So please also help us to complete this short webinar survey so that we can actually create relevant content and improve for our future sessions. You can scan the QR code or enter the link on the screen to access to the survey form. So once again, thank you everyone for attending today. We hope to see you soon again in the next session. And thank you to all our speakers. Take care everyone and stay safe.